creepy and geeky. Welcome to the Double Feature Podcast of Horror and More. I'm your host, Robert, and today's episode is the first in a two-part series talking about the Evil Dead movie franchise, just in time for the new movie, Evil Dead Rise, to come out. Joining me today is Onika J, who is, in their words, a reformed scaredy cat looking to push for more queer Black voices in horror. Welcome to the show, Onika.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this.
I'm excited to have you on. I likewise am always trying to get more non-straight white voices onto my show. So, because I myself am a straight white man, so it's always nice to have other people with other perspectives. And that's kind of what I search out in my guests, is anybody who can bring a different perspective than I have. It's always great to have somebody like you on. And
yeah, I see that Dawn of the
thank
Dead
you.
is a
Oh yeah.
big continuous guest, and it's super exciting for me.
Oh yeah, no, she's one of my best friends online, and she likes coming on. I like having her on, and I love her podcast. So it's always fun having her on. So it's good to have you on as well. And that being said, let's jump in, and we're going to start off with, what was your first horror movie?
Okay, so the thing of it is, like I said, I'm a reformed scaredy cat. Like when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I was absolutely terrified of everything. I wouldn't watch Goosebumps. I was afraid of James and the Giant Peach, which I still kind of am, no lie. So I didn't see my first horror movie until I was like 14 years old. And it was actually The Lost Boys.
Oh,
And it's funny because like when I watched it, I'm like, it didn't register to me that this was a horror movie,
right.
but I was like, oh yeah, vampires. Like we were just in the throes of Twilight fever at the time, which is me revealing my age. um, but so I was like, this is like not and I had been reading Anne Rice at the time, and I'm like, so this is
Oh, okay.
not Anne Rice and this is not Twilight, but what this is, I love. And then like it also served as like kind of like this realization for my like gender awakening, where I realized I may not be like a girl, because I saw David and I was like, I've never wanted to be a person more in my life. Like, I've never seen a man in my life who I wanted to be more, but at the same time, just wanted to be Xena, and also like not either of those at the same time. So
Right.
it was this like a massive awakening for me, where it's just like, wow, I am not straight, I am not cisgender, and I really love horror.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that Lost Boys is a great movie. And very, like, it's pretty queer on its own. I mean, you can make the argument that David and the relationship between David and Michael has some definite queer undertones to it.
Oh,
But I mean, go
I'll
ahead.
die on that hill. I'll die on that
Yeah,
hill.
yeah. No, but I think vampires in general are very queer horror archetype. They fit. There's all kinds of stuff, and you spoke about Anne Rice, and Lestat and Louis. They obviously were a queer, stuff was going on there as well, especially in the new series that they got going on. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot to that. So I can see where that would be an awakening of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually funny. I say I'm a reformed scaredy cat, and my biggest thing was I was terrified of child's play movies. Like I can watch them. I still can't technically watch a Child's Play movie without like icy cold, panic inducing fear. Um, but the new TV show, I can watch it all
Yeah.
day, every day. I love it, and it's because of that one line at the beginning where it's they're talking about Glenn and Glenda, and it's not he's not a monster for not loving his trans children.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. It's like the whole rest of the world is a monster and Chucky's not, and I'm not scared anymore. So
He's still a
horror's done
killer,
like a
but
lot
he's
for
a good
me.
dad. Yeah.
Horror's done a lot for me in terms of like, you know, getting myself to where I am now, the confidence that I have.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I love that that's what's great about horror in general is that you can um see yourself in so many facets, and horror in general has so many layers to it. There's so many different subgenres to it that there's always something that you can find pieces of yourself in and discover in yourself. And I love that's something that everybody can do. So that's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. That is awesome. All right. Well, that being said, let's jump into the Evil Dead series with Evil Dead 1, which came out in 1981, but was filmed back in 1979. Um, so it definitely feels kind of like that movie that's on the cusp of the 80s. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, compared to, like, we know of the Evil Dead series, like most people know of the Evil Dead series as being this very funny, very um, um, splat stick kind of movie franchise. But in this first one, it's very much not that. It's very much a more just straight up horror, where the comedy from it comes more from weird line deliveries and more unintentional things than anything else. Which is funny though, because Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi, their background previous to this was making all these comedic short films in their backyards and stuff. And so but they wanted to get into movie making, and they thought, hey, let's make a movie that people are going to like, and horror seemed to be the best way to do that. And they did pretty well with it. When did you first see this movie?
So I saw this movie when I was like, I want to say 18.
Okay.
It was on, uh, gosh, I don't even remember what channel it was on, but I ended up seeing it like edited for television. So
Mm.
I missed a lot of it.
Yeah.
Um, and then I said I saw it, said I liked it, to one of my friends, and they're like, "Okay, you have seen nothing. Sit down." And they pull it out like on DVD, and I sit there and I watch the whole thing, and I'm just like, I love this. This is fantastic. I This is the pinnacle of horror. There will never be anything better. And then I saw Evil Dead 2 and my opinion had to change, but I think it is very amazing like how Evil Dead 2 basically has sculpted the discussion of Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And Evil Dead 1 kind of just gets left out of the conversation because it's I'm trying to think of it's very unique
Yeah.
to me. Like especially since now after like, almost like 30 years worth of history behind it now, um it's inspired so much,
Yeah.
so much, and not Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead itself, it's inspired everything. And I think it's funny that you mentioned like it's just a straight up horror movie because it actually was supposed to be like a horror drama where it was
Yeah.
supposed to focus more on like, you know, Ash's relationship with his sister and how he reacts to losing everyone, but they cut a lot of that idea so that they could just make a straight horror movie. And it's amazing because it still does get through in the
Yeah.
film, like how devastating this is for Ash. He loses everybody who matters to him in one night.
Yeah. 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 His sister, his girlfriend, his friend and his girlfriend, just everybody just gets massacred in that one night. And it's insane. I mean, it's very indicative of most, slasher kind of movies and stuff at the time, but taking it in this weird, like not weird, but in this more demonic presence direction, takes out that kind of slasher role of it, and it becomes much more insidious, um which I love about the franchise overall, is just how really, like, at its core, it's really fucking dark.
Mm-hmm.
um like they make, like, the comedy is ramped up in the next two movies, but the overall, like, way that things happen are just, it's just really terrible. And you see it more um in this first movie, and in the 2013 Evil Dead, where it's just, where they go more for that serious tone,
Mm-hmm.
and just how bad this really is, because this presence, once it gets into you, that's it, it's done, you're gone, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Exactly. And I like how you brought up like how it differs from slasher movies because slasher movies have that moral component to it. Um, where we're still endure at the time we were still enduring the leftovers from the Hayes Code, where
Yeah.
immorality, gosh, immorality has to be punished.
Right.
So sex, drugs, all needs to like be punished. In Evil Dead, they're punished for curiosity,
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
sex, not the drugs. Um, to basically like quote from Cabin in the Woods, which very super Evil Dead inspired, if
Yeah.
but by majority and on top of everything else, it was kind of like the stock standard like now of if you do not transgress, you cannot be punished.
Right.
It
Yeah.
feels like they're set up from the beginning to fail.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of Evil Dead, it's just like everything is pushing them towards that basement. And
Oh yeah.
once they have the tape, it's just like then it's just their decision. It's like, do you press play or do you ignore it?
Yeah.
And they have a chance. Even after they've hit play the first time, they have that chance. Cheryl's telling them to stop, and Cheryl is like super in tune with like everything. She has already been warned. She's
Right.
already heard the join us, and she's
Yeah.
telling them stop it. And Scott being the basically like the movie's version of the machismo dude, even though he's not really, not in the
Yeah.
way that we see it now. Um, he keeps playing it because he's like, this is good for a laugh. I'm gonna mess with everybody a little bit. This is creepy and it's making everybody uncomfortable. I've had a few. I was drinking moonshine in the car on the way up. I'm gonna keep playing it.
Yeah.
And just with one button press, their whole lives are over. All of them, like including Ash's. Ash's life is over.
Yeah. Yeah. Ash's life is forever changed after this night. It's he is permanently scarred by this, and it never ever lets him go, as we see in later installments.
Yeah,
But
especially
yeah.
Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we get, yeah, I agree with you. I think that, this one is all about that curse of curiosity, that, are, if you find something that you shouldn't, because like you said, like, they had no chance once they were in that cabin. it was too late. The Deadites were already, pushing them towards that. There was no way for them not to play that tape and to awaken it fully. Um, and once, because I mean, there was a presence there before they even did any of that. Like you said, it was telling Cheryl to join us. So there was no chance for them. It was all once they got onto that land, and into that cabin, that was when it all ended for them. They were not getting out of there. And you see that kind of in Evil Dead 2. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's very much carries over into that next movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's I that's what I really enjoy about these movies is that like this, as much as it sucks, and I would hate for it to happen to me, that this, anytime that people get to this cabin or get anytime people basically encounter this book, it just is over for them. Like they are just, it's tainted them and it's grabbed into them, and there's nothing that they can do about it but hopefully fight against it, and hopefully find some kind of victory over it. I do think it is interesting that Ash is, up until this point, Ash is the only one to resist the Deadite infection, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
because they do get inside of him, but he's able to resist it, whereas nobody else is. Like once somebody's been taken over, that's it, they're done. And you see, you could argue that maybe some of that comes out like here and there, when they switch back to normal. But I always think that that's more the Deadite playing with Ash and not actually, them gaining any kind of control. So
I wholly agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that for anybody else there's really anything left of them. It seems to just like because when Ash says, "Why are you torturing me?" That's what they're doing. They're torturing him.
yeah,
It's all about um how like getting him to break.
yeah,
That's it. Because like once Cheryl has her encounter in the woods, um, which I know is the most controversial scene in the entire movie
yes,
and
in the entire
is the
franchise, yeah,
yeah and is the reason why like I have friends who won't watch the movie because they've
right,
heard so much about it, and like there's nothing that I can tell them about that scene that's going to make them feel good about watching the
yeah,
movie, like get them comfortable to that point.
yeah,
But once she once she has her encounter in the woods, she runs for her brother. That is what she's going for. She's like, I need my brother. I need to get out.
yeah,
And one of the things that I appreciate about Ash as a character, like, despite the fact that, like, he tells her, "Do you hear what you're saying? This doesn't make any sense." He
right,
gets her out.
yeah,
He takes her out of there. He says, I will get you into town. I don't care if what you're saying doesn't make any sense. You're obviously something happened to you. I don't know what happened to you, but I need to get you out of here. I need you to be safe.
right, absolutely,
And he doesn't get to do that. And I feel like that's when like the Deadites in and of themselves kind of make that decision. Oh, this one. This is the one we've got to like just mess up the
yeah.
most.
Well,
Because
there's.
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. No, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was about to say because it's just kind of like proof of Ash's goodness, like at his whole, even through like all the iterations where he kind of becomes an asshole, he's
Yeah,
still good.
yeah, yeah. And I wonder, like, because you see him in this first movie, and he's fairly a decent person. Like, none of his weird assholish like parts of him are really there. Um, like that doesn't really come into play until really the second movie. And I think that was just them developing the character more. But I would argue that there's the possibility that maybe once he had that slight Deadite influence inside of him, that may have increased that to some degree, where it wasn't maybe as pronounced as before. Um, because in the first movie, he's a goof and and everything, but he's a generally stand-up guy, um, who tries to do his best in this situation. You don't really see that kind of, you know, that the character he becomes later. And you can argue, sure, maybe in this instance he wasn't, that he didn't have that chance to show that yet or whatever. But you know, I'm curious if that, maybe it wasn't the intent, because I've never heard anybody talk about it, but maybe that Deadite influence flipped that a little bit, and it's something that tainted him from the inside at that point.
Well, yeah, I definitely I see where you're coming from there, and like that's a pretty good theory.
Yeah.
Because like I would say, yeah, influence, but also trauma.
Yeah.
Because I there will never be a man more traumatized than Ashley J. Williams. Um, but yeah, no, he's a very stand-up person. Like you see that with Cheryl, and you see that with Linda, and you see it with Scott. Like Scott's messed up. Scott is
Yeah.
dying. And he's still, we're gonna get out of here. He's giving him water that he can't drink. And it's just like, and he's not doing it for him. Like he's talking for him, but he's not doing
Right.
that. He's just doing his best and trying to like relieve the damage somewhat, even though he knows like deep
Yeah.
inside there's no fixing what's happening. He can't fix the fact that like Scott's nearly had like half his face torn off at this point.
Right.
Whatever happened to him in the woods ruined him. He's dying. Linda's gone.
Yeah.
Shelly's in pieces. And Cheryl's in the basement and she's gone too. He's the only one left, really, because Scott's not conscious. So he's just trying to hold himself together. And I think that's like been also a really big part of Evil Dead is focusing on Ash's like sanity level, so to speak,
Yeah.
because he loses it pretty frequently before he
Oh
gets
yeah.
himself back together. But
Right.
in the case of like, Army of Darkness, quite literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of him having to like just stop, get himself together, and keep moving forward. And like I don't like at the beginning it's for him and Scott. And later on it's mostly for himself because he's all that's left, but he need at the beginning he needed to cling to the whole Scott thing because that was keeping him grounded in that moment instead of just losing it because Linda's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting too. Yeah, like you mentioned, that aspect of him losing his sanity and and regaining it, um so that he can, he let so here's how I think of it. He lets the insanity in just enough to kind of deal with it, to
Mm-hmm.
process it, and then he can move on. I never really thought about it until you brought it up, that that letting that in for him was like him processing everything that's around him, just fully letting in that madness, and so that he can then move on and take care of what he needs to take care of. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, like I know that we'll get into it more with Evil Dead 2, but like
Yeah.
it's a really good scene where like, everything in the cabin is laughing at him and losing it and he lets himself join it
Yeah,
until he hears the
exactly.
sound of the door and he's back to business and he shoots. Is he right in that moment? No, he's shooting at regular people, but
Yeah.
he let himself process that insanity. He let himself roll with that flow. And the moment that he needed to do what he needed to do, he was back on target.
Yeah. 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 No, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that. I this conversation's bringing a lot of new ways. This is hands down my favorite horror franchise. I love this franchise so much, and so it's this is what I love about this podcast is talking to somebody and then getting a different perspective on things that I hadn't thought of before, exactly like this. So thank you.
No, no problem. Like it's my favorite franchise too. Um, so I like obviously before I did this, I rewatched them because
Yes.
I would have ended up Ash Wednesday Pat is like coming up, so I would have watched it anyway. But um, but
Yeah.
it's always good to like go back and just look at it and like think of things you didn't think of before.
Yeah.
Um, just because like you can always come at horror movies that you've loved a lot with a lot of like new perspectives. And
Yeah.
because like I can tell you now, like the way I felt when I watched Friday the 13th the first time and the way I feel when I watch Friday the 13th now is not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
it's always good to like go back to those things you love and just have that moment of just gosh, wow, I really love that and I didn't appreciate that enough until this moment. But wow, that's everything. But you want to know what one thing from Evil Dead remains the same no matter how many times you watch, no matter if it's the first time or the day you watch it before you die? The appreciation of Bruce Campbell's eyebrows and jawline.
They are both very, very, very pronounced, especially in this first movie. Uh,
You said pronounced, but I think you meant magnificent.
neither they do not contradict each other. No, yeah, it's it's funny too. Uh, as much as this is my favorite franchise, I came at this at a different in a different way because I actually watched Army of Darkness first. That was my first introduction to Ash and the world of the Deadites. And then I later on went, oh, there were two movies before this. Interesting. Okay, I'll go back and watch these. And whereas number one is kind of like going back and watching number one after having seen Army of Darkness is kind of like, wait, what? How is this? How does this get to there? And then when you watch Evil Dead 2, then it becomes clear because they Evil Dead 2 bridges that gap. It very much takes what happened in number one and transitions it to Army of Darkness into that silliness and everything. So it's this nice little, uh, because number two is not nearly as wacky as number three is, as Army of Darkness is, and it's a lot wackier than number one.
Oh
So
yeah.
so it's definitely and that was Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell bringing in that Three Stooges sensibility that they had wanted to do for a while, and I think that's what makes the franchise also very unique compared to a lot of others. Is this absurdity, especially with you know the Deadites and this because it mixes this, like I said, this really dark subject of these Deadites uh, taking over people and basically um, taking full control of them, and there's nothing for them to come back for. You have to kill them to stop the Deadites, and so it's super dark. And then to mix it with this absurd level of comedy to balance that out is just it shouldn't work. It really shouldn't, but it does.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's one of those moments where it's just like, oh, so this is like the pinnacle of what they mean by black comedy. It's just like,
Yeah.
because this is one of the darkest things I've ever seen in my life, but I am laughing as hard as I can. And there's still a few comedic elements to like Evil Dead 1 just to break
Yeah.
up the tension a little bit. But for the most part, that movie is there to scare you. And
Oh yeah.
it did so, by making everyone else in the vicinity around it just the most miserable they possibly could be for 12 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
No,
like
this was
that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was about to say that's like, one of the most well-known things about the movie is like just how
Oh yeah.
bad everyone on it had it, and the fact that
Oh
it
yeah.
is probably the biggest gamble Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi made in their entire lives, and boy did it pay off.
After having watched these three again recently and kind of delving back through like some of the special features and stuff and their discussions and everything about all of these movies is that each one of these was actually just really terrible in terms of the making of them and like really hard on them. And so it's always surprising that they went ahead and made another one because each one was just horrendous. Now, was it as bad as the first one? Probably not, since they all had to live inside of that cabin um the entire time they were shooting there, and it was in winter in Tennessee, so it was super cold. But it's just, but each one of these has just been like, I don't know, really bad conditions. Like at least with number two, apparently they had built the set inside of a middle school gymnasium, so they weren't out in the elements as much. So, but physically for Bruce Campbell, each one of these movies has just been terrible. He gets the crap beat out of him constantly, and it's a
Every
running
time.
joke that Sam Raimi just tortures him on each one of these movies.
Yeah. But still best friends.
Oh yeah, no, he's still like Bruce Campbell still goes back for it every time. You know, like we see in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he's beating the crap out of himself again for Sam Raimi. So,
I haven't seen that yet. I should.
oh,
I definitely should.
spoiler alert!
Everybody says
Sorry.
it's great. It's okay. Like, don't worry. There's nothing that hasn't already been spoiled for me. It's been so
Yeah,
long. At this point, it's just visually processing the movie so that I can get all the
right.
bits of it. But I don't know. Like, I'm kind of like in that whole Marvel standoff. But anyway,
Well,
um,
as a fan of the Evil Dead franchise, I will say that it definitely has some moments that feel like it. So it's definitely a fun movie for that. If and when you do watch it.
oh, I probably will at some point. Just like you said, Sam Raimi's there. I usually have to at least check in.
Right, right. All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Evil Dead 2. Um, when did you first see this one?
So immediately after my friend showed me the first one, because she's like, "All right, now it's time. Here is the movie that is going to change your life." And I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" And she's like, "Listen, you really liked that one." She's like, "But you're gonna love this one." She's like, "I know you. You're gonna love this." And she was not wrong. I'm just like, "Oh my God, this is everything I've ever wanted." And this is to, a good horror movie is scary. An iconic horror
Yes.
movie is campy. I love
Yeah.
camp and horror. I like Evil Dead to Texas Chainsaw Massacre to um, Prom Night to Hello Mary Lou. And what's the other one? Oh gosh, there's one more. Dead Alive, which I
Oh,
still
okay.
call Brain Dead for the most part, but I know a lot of people might not recognize it by that name. So Dead Alive. Um,
Right.
I need that camp. I love all forms of horror for the most part, but like Evil Dead is the reason why camp in horror will always be my ideal form of horror, which is why when Malignant came out and I watched it and it like still had that element of camp to it, I'm like, this is the best movie of the year. No one can tell me different.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'm not as big on Malignant, but I do like camp and horror. Like I loved Megan, which recently came out. Some of the other stuff that's come out, Barbarian. That
Ugh. I'm not a fan of Barbarian.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. I'm not a fan of Malignant, so we'll
It's
we'll
just like
agree to disagree.
I was about to say we can agree to disagree. That's the best part of the horror community. Not all of
Ex-
us like the same stuff.
Exactly. And that's what's funny too. Like, I go into this like, with other people and I've talked to other people. There's so many things that, are people say, oh, well, these are the best things in horror. And sometimes I agree, a lot of times I don't. But um, but that's what's good. And as long as you can have good conversations with people, you can disagree about what's good and what isn't good, because that's personal taste, but you know, trying to, oh, well, it's good. You can't say it's not good, blah, blah, whatever. I don't care. Um,
Oh, don't worry. I've
so
had that conversation about like Hereditary, where it's just like I don't like Hereditary or The Witch very much, and
okay,
people are just like, it is the most amazing thing in filmmaking ever, and I'm like, I will admit that they're good movies. I'm just saying that
right.
I didn't like it. I'm like,
Yeah,
listen, I'll stand there all day and like tell you Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary was like revolutionary. She deserved awards. It didn't mean that I liked the movie.
right. Yeah. I mean, I like both of those movies, but I can see where they're not everybody's cup of tea. I'm the same way about like The Exorcist and The Shining. I don't really care about those movies. They don't do anything for me, but I know they're beloved in the horror community. Everybody, like, seems to be most people love those two movies. They just don't do anything for me. That's fine. It's we all have our own personal tastes, and which is great, because that's what, and even if like I have somebody on the show who doesn't agree with me about something that I do like, or maybe I don't like something that they like. That's what's great about that, is that we can find maybe a common ground. Because, like you said, you can agree that that performance by Toni Collette in the movie is really good, despite you not liking the movie as a whole. It's the same thing. I can admire things about The Exorcist and The Shining, regardless of whether or not they work for me. I still think that there are parts of those movies that are fantastic. But that's what I love about when you can have a good, like, nice discussion with people. Because don't get me wrong, there are some people who are just terrible in the horror community. But
I Yeah, I know. I've met a few. Mostly I've gotten some luckily not public like pushback about my disdain for Jeepers Creepers.
oh
Um for, the obvious reason. Um
yeah,
I
you've
stand
gotten
really
pushback
strongly.
about that.
Yeah, I've gotten it's separate the art from the artist thing, and I'm like,
No,
I
no,
can't look at that movie and not think about it.
yeah,
That's all I can think about. So like no matter how good it is, no matter how much I have good memories of it, that kind of stands like first and foremost in my head, and it stays there. And like I understand that there's some people who do want to do the separate the art from the artist thing, and it's like, okay, whatever you do in the seclusion of your own home is your own business. I'm not telling
right.
you what you can and can't watch. That's not
Yeah,
what I'm here to do.
absolutely.
But don't get down on me because like morally and like ethically for me personally watching that movie is a no-go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
But I also, yeah, I'm on your side. I don't really like The Shining either. And that's also that people love to tell you about how Kubrick's a genius, and it's just like, okay, that I liked A Clockwork Orange. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in the camp of I don't think Kubrick's a genius. I mean,
Me
he
either.
was he was an okay filmmaker, but I don't like absolutely. I have not seen a single movie of his that I have enjoyed. So now, to
So
be
when I
fair, I
say
haven't
like
seen a
A
lot of
Clockwork
his
Orange,
movies. I haven't seen that one yet, but but again, the few movies that I've seen of his are kind of like it's one of those things where you've seen a few of a person's movies and you kind of get a feel for it, and you're just kind of like, don't like even if there is something that's people say is good. Again, if I've seen the other stuff that people say is good and I didn't like it, I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna probably watch that other thing. So
I mean that's fair, and I wouldn't like as somebody who says they like A Clockwork Orange, I would recommend not. I wouldn't recommend it to somebody. I really wouldn't unless they're already a Kubrick fan.
yeah,
Um, like, and when I say like A Clockwork Orange, I think it's a well-made movie. I really like Malcolm McDowell as an actor all
right,
around. Like everything he does is amazing to me, even when the movie's
yeah,
really, really bad. Um, But I also was a teenage edgelord, and that movie's kind of it for edgelords. That's right up on the list. It's like the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where
Yeah.
I'm coming
It's kind of like how they're starting to react to Fight Club these days, and which is really unfortunate because they really don't understand Fight Club. So
No, they do not. No, they do not. I love the book, and I love Chuck. I love Chuck's books, like all of
yes.
them. My favorite is still Invisible Monsters, even though it hasn't aged like the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
But I still love it. And it's just like when you read Fight Club and then you like watch Fight Club, and it's just like, how are you all getting like the wrong idea? Chuck, can you
Oh my
tell them to
gosh.
stop?
Well, even the movie is pretty clear. So it's like
Yeah.
it's not just Chuck, but even Chuck, like I guess apparently has come out recently and is like, well, everything's kind of open to interpretation. No, it's not. Like, please tell them that they are fascists. Um,
Yeah, it's
so
one of those things where it's just like, Chuck, I know that money is like cool and we live in a capitalistic society and you need that, and like you need it to keep like making stuff. That's how it fuels your art. And I love your
yeah,
art. But please tell them that they have completely misunderstood your character. Like, you don't need to tell them that it's open for interpretation. You don't need to tell anybody anything's open for interpretation. That was your
yeah,
character. You wrote
yeah.
it.
Be
You
clear.
had clear intentions.
Yeah.
Let them know it. I
Right.
would.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The as an aside, my favorite book of his is Lullaby. So
So good. I also like
uh,
Haunted, which like
yes.
still like makes my tummy hurt when I think
Oh
about
yeah.
it. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. 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 All right. I don't want to go down the Chuck Palahniuk route right now.
Yeah.
Let's get back to Evil Dead 2.
Yes.
But yes, Evil Dead 2, very campy. Very much takes it in a more Looney Tunes, Three Stooges direction. Um, which I love. It's probably the one I've watched the least though, because Army of Darkness is going to always be my favorite. It's the first one I saw. It's I don't know why that one just specifically speaks to me the most, but that's the one I love and watch the most. And I've seen Evil Dead quite a few times more. And I don't know, Evil Dead 2, because it sits kind of in that weird section between the two of them, as and it's partially a remake of number one, only by a bit because they needed to do that because they couldn't use footage from the first one. Um,
Mhm.
and then kind of goes into this extra direction, like the new story for it, by introducing Annie Nobe and all of them. That it's fun though. Like I may have seen it the least, but um, but it's still super fun, and enjoyable.
It is. It's a romp, and it's the one I've seen the most. It's my favorite one. It's funny enough, Army of Darkness is probably the one that I've seen the least, and not
Right.
because of any like intention, like where I don't like it. I do. I like it a lot. Um, Honestly, I'll watch anything with Bruce Campbell in it, even if it's bad. So, like, I would never admit if I would never admit to Army of Darkness being bad if I thought it was. But I own it. I keep every time I'm like, I'm gonna watch all three. I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna watch all three, and I watch two. I watch two again, and then I go back to watch two again because like I'll skip ahead and then I'll end up doing something else, and it's just like I need to just sit down and watch Army of Darkness because it's funny because I keep watching Evil Dead 2, but my partner's favorite one is Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness is my partner's favorite.
That's
So
funny.
it's just like he'll independently watch it on his own. I and like have his moments. Um it's very funny because like when we had a had a breakup for a period of time, and I was feeling particularly vindictive, and I think I watched Army of Darkness like four times in a row just so I could passively aggressively post on Facebook quotes from the movie. It's just like, haha, I'm watching this without you. I am So like, it's just like so like I've seen it a fair share of times, and it's just like it wasn't even anything that was like tinged by the sadness of the breakup. I just was actually having a lot of fun watching it. I'm like, this is actually really good for my mood. I feel better after this because it's it's funny movie. It's
Yeah.
more funny than the other two by spades.
Yeah.
Because because they were trying to get like avoid that X rating
Yeah.
this time around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Definitely.
but I love the balance between the two,
Yeah.
Evil Dead 1 and Evil and Army of Darkness. Like I love that Evil Dead 2 is the balance. Like it hits that sweet spot for me where it's
Yeah.
just enough of each. And so like and on top of the fact, I just love all the claymation and the effects and just it's just such a the way I just like it's bonkers. It's just a bonkers
Yeah.
movie, and I love every single moment of it. Like I don't have a single. There's not a frame of that movie that I don't love. I
No,
I
I agree. It's a great movie, and I love it too. I think that it's one of those things where I don't know why I don't watch it more. But I know it's a lot of people's favorite of the franchise. It's a lot of people's favorite of the franchise because it does
mhm.
strike that balance. It's super gory. It's got lots of blood. It's got lots of body parts and everything going for it. And more so than the first one, and way more than Army of Darkness does. It's got that horror element and it's got that comedy mixed in really well, and especially the sequence with Ash's hand.
Mm,
That like that whole sequence, the evil getting into his hand is just glorious.
yeah, there's nothing can beat it. Nothing. But yeah, that's one of the things. Like, it's so over the top gory. Like, and I think that's one of the things that I love so much about Brain Dead is that it's so over the top. Because
Right.
I see a lot of people who say, I don't like gory movies. But when they say I don't like gory movies, they're talking about like the Saw franchise from like two down, because the first one's
Yeah.
not particularly gory. Um, but like and usually that's what they mean, and I'm like, but what if the gore is in service of comedy? Would you perhaps be interested in it if it's that way? And some people are just like, no, I just like it kind of grosses me out, and I'm like, I understand, because I don't particularly like gross out horror. Like I'm not a big fan of Slither, even though like I acknowledge that people
Yeah.
really love it, and I can understand why they love it, because I love Evil Dead too, but it's like
Right.
too much. It's too gross for me.
It's yeah, yeah, yeah. I own it, but that one's really, really gross. Yeah, there's a certain weird, yeah, there's a weird level where I don't know. I guess with body horror, for me
Mhm,
is
mhm.
that body horror goes into an area that I'm just not a huge fan of. Like I'll watch stuff with it, like Slither or The Thing or whatever. But
Hard save.
there's a certain aspect of it that just icks me out too much, and it's I can't deal with it in general. Yeah, so Slither isn't one that I will watch often because of that very reason. It's just gross.
I I have a lot of like issues with body horror too. Like Hellraiser's technically body horror, and I'll watch that any
Right.
day, all day, any given day of the week because I love it.
Yeah.
Um, but you try to make me watch a Cronenberg film, and I'm kind of just
Yeah.
not going to come with you on that one. Like,
Yeah.
I might not be too like keen on the Cronenberg. And sometimes I wonder if it's because like I'm trans and I have like, this really big like issue surround like, I've had this issue with my body where, just now I'm starting to like come into my body and feel comfortable in it, and like
Right.
being in this like have experiencing like things that aren't supposed to be happening to a body on screen just kind of is a kind of triggering in a way.
Yeah.
Not to out to use an overused term for things that aren't actually triggering, but it kind of actually is for me. So like when I'm watching it, it's just like I'm uncomfortable in my own body, especially since a lot of like female led body horror is pregnancy based.
Yeah.
And that is like just so not where I want to be in my life, where I want to think about that or even focus on it in the slightest.
Yeah, yeah.
Like my mom constantly tells me, stop calling pregnancy a Cronenberg style body horror. And I'm like, but I'm going to. And it's one of those things where it's just like it's I guess like I don't know, I did the whole transformation thing, but like, in bits, like if there's a particularly good scene of it, like in some movies, like, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be like, that was such, and also I love practical effects so
Yes.
much. So like like The Thing, I'm not actually a big fan of The Thing as a movie because I'm a weird person who, for some reason, doesn't really like sci-fi horror. Strange, I know. Um, but I love The Thing for its practical effects. I
Right.
look at that and I'm like, this is high art. I've this is the pinnacle of what we should do. This is what we can be when we make films. Look at this love and care and attention. It's wonderful. So like,
Yeah.
despite the fact that like I'm not a big fan of the particular genre of the film, the technical details of it are just so fascinating and amazing to me that I can't not watch it. I
Right.
can't not look at it and just marvel at the artistry of it all. Which is like also
Absolutely.
one of the things that I love about Evil Dead 2 is practical effects. They worked so hard. It's That's the
Oh,
thing
they
about
upped
both
their
of
game
them.
on them. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the thing about both of them. It's such a passion. It's such a passion for them. Like you can see love in the work. And that's what you want to see. You want to see someone so passionate about it. Even in Evil Dead 1 where it's not as good, you still see that they loved it and they were doing their
Oh,
best to
yeah.
make it look good as they could. And you can't like not love that. It's one of the reasons why I like the movie Smile, even though it's not
Yeah.
particularly a movie that like in most places I would actually enjoy. But they included Amalgamated Dynamics, who deserve their flowers after what they put them through for the Thing remake.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
brought them in, and they are artists, and I can't not love it.
Yeah, no, I love the practical effects that they're doing in Evil Dead 2. I mean, Henrietta, um,
Mm,
there's just all Evil Ed, all of that just combines into so many good things. The giant deadite thing that comes through the cabin at the very end. There's
Rotten
so many,
Applehead.
yeah, Rotten Applehead. Um, all of that stuff just combines to make a much bigger, broader movie in terms of everything. I mean, we even get the trees are moving outside and they're walking towards the house and just banging on the cabin, and it's so many of these things add up to this much bigger um story than the first one. Of course, the first one was on a super shoestring budget. They had no money at all,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to do everything as best as they could, and they did great with what they had. um it sure, it doesn't stand up over time and everything, but they did what they could, and they did pretty well with it. And but when they were doing number two, they were like, okay, let's do bigger and better. And they did. I think they made arguably a better sequel, better original than they did the first time. I think that's why everybody loves this one. um Generally speaking, most people tend to favor this one out of the whole franchise because it's the one that carries the horror and the comedy in equal measure, and it does so well.
Yeah, it's just you rarely see things like come together so well and see it and just like perform basically become this harmonious whole like Evil Dead and like various movies throughout history have done. But like I think it's because it's that harmonious whole that Evil Dead 2 is so popular. But it's just, I don't know, the whole series, Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, they are just this amazing glance into what horror was at the time, and basically how, and now when you look at horror now, how it's shaped it, how it
Yeah.
changed it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think and it's interesting too because thinking about that, we can talk about Sam Raimi as a director and his visual style that I would argue most directors don't have.
No,
There's
no.
something in what Sam Raimi does that nobody else even tries to touch, or when they do, doesn't really succeed as well. And I would argue that there's not very many directors that you can say they have a distinctive visual style. They're all good craftsmen, they're all good directors, but nobody does it like Sam Raimi does. And I think he created this um, sense of space and movement that um in this franchise that nobody else has been able to do in such a way. And maybe that's because they don't want to mimic him, which is good. But again, I argue that nobody else is doing anything like he does.
I agree. Like, I don't know how to define what Sam Raimi does, like, because he's the only one who does it. It's just one of those things. Like, I hate to bring him up, but it's like how, like, no one could really do what Joss Whedon did, but not in a but for Sam Raimi it's a good way, whereas Joss Whedon
Yeah,
it's a bad thing, and it's just like, oh great, it just this just got Whedoned.
yeah,
But with when it's like Sam Raimi, it's just a verb on its own.
yeah.
It's a verb. It's a noun. It's everything. It's just it's its own class of thing,
Right,
and it's his own very distinct style, and it's really amazing to watch, which is why I think he's been so successful, because no one does what he does and like makes it look the way he does. And I think like one of the things helped was like him being so close in the beginning to everyone involved, where it was just like, his friends, his family are involved.
right.
Like especially like nobody can and I'm sorry, nobody can be Bruce Campbell. Like nobody can have Bruce's face and Bruce's mannerisms and move the way
Right,
Bruce moves. And I don't think anybody directs Bruce the way that Sam does to maximize his full potential.
right. Yeah, no, they are definitely one of the best actor director combos. Um, and I think that that's why they continue to um, you know to work together all these years later, because they are truly you know the best of friends, and and work together so well. And so well, in fact, that Bruce has been a producer on every one of these movies. He's an integral part of getting these movies made. He's not just the star, that he is a part of the creative process of it all. And from the stories that I've heard him tell, that that Raimi is a very open and collaborative director and writer, that on all of the movies that Bruce has worked on, that they'll do they'll do the take as written, and then Raimi will come back and go, okay, let's try some new things, let's try different things, and he'll keep trying things to see if things, maybe there's another take that will work better, in better ways. Not like the take sucked, let's try something different. It's that was great, let's try something different and see, maybe if something else would be better. And so it's it as much as the shoots have been hard, um from what I mentioned earlier, that these were really hard movies to make, they, listening to the stories afterward, that you can tell there was such a love for it, as much as as much as Bruce is like, I never want to do this ever again. He was
Mm-hmm.
like, but he did it three times and for three whole seasons of a TV show, that he played this character for a long time. It was obviously something that meant a lot to him, and he there's that love and respect for each other as the director and the actor, and I think that shows through the entirety of the franchise, even to this day with the new movie coming out.
I agree. Like, but like for Bruce, like it's just even like it's so much to him because like he was in it like from the beginning. He put his money up for Evil Dead
Yeah,
1. He physically was like all the other actors left and they still had a ton of work that they had to do and Bruce stayed and
yeah,
was helping. Like, that first shot across in the as the evil like creeps over the water, that's Bruce putting Sam on a boat.
yep, yep.
It's just like it's the devotion like from everyone that
Well,
makes it so magical.
yeah, and a large part of it is because it was a project that they all did together. It was a project conceived by Raimi and Campbell and Rob Tappert, who is the major producer for all of these movies as well. They as a trio have shepherded each one of these movies, and even the 2013 movie and Evil Dead Rise that's coming out. They are still fully a part of these movies. They are overseeing every aspect of this in a way that sometimes a lot of these people don't. Any they could have let it go. They could have just been like, yeah, do whatever you want. Here's the name. Do whatever you want. Make something okay. But they are still a part of this and believe in the new work in it and everything. And they make sure that before they put out something, especially something with their name on it, that it's going to be part of this franchise and going to be, the best that it can be before it's released.
Yeah. It's just I don't know. Like I said, it's magical. I couldn't ever fully like even knowing all the technical details, knowing their relationship, it seems surreal that something comes together so well to become so iconic. And it's just like starting from such humble roots. It's just like
Oh yeah.
how how can so many people be so talented and so amazing to have given me this much joy in my life? Obviously, you are magic.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed.
But
Uh,
I love all of it so much. Like I probably am gonna after we've had this conversation, I'm probably gonna end up watching them all again just because it just like because then I get to look at it again with again fresh eyes and notice things that I didn't see before and appreciate it even more afterwards.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have watched the entire franchise again, and I'm currently going through the Ash versus Evil Dead series again, pretty much for the first time since it came out. Um, but yeah, it's just fun being able to revisit these movies. I try to revisit them every year because it's just fun to pop them in and have a good time. And just I love them. They, like I said, they are my favorite horror franchise. I've got tons of artwork on my walls of it, and it's just I don't know. It speaks to me on a level that pretty much nothing else does.
I get it. I really do. I absolutely understand. It's just like, wow, I feel seen. And I don't know why, but I do. Um, but also, like I said, with Lost Boys, I felt seen and I feel seen every
Yeah.
time I watch it. And I'm like, gosh, what I wouldn't give to be an 80s vampire on the boardwalk and just so gay. And it's just
Yeah.
like, well, I can like meet up some of that. I can be some of that. I'm gonna do
Hey,
that.
after that movie came out, after Lost Boys came out, now I'm a child of the '80s, so I saw it when it came out, and I was definitely wearing a trench coat after that point. It didn't matter if it was I lived in Hawaii at the time, and so
Oh,
I was wearing a trench coat in tropical weather. To be fair, sometimes it was fairly rainy there, so it wasn't a bad idea. But other days it was kind of hot, so wearing a black trench coat was probably not a good idea.
oh gosh, I can only imagine. Like, I don't worry. I also had my trench coat phase and like actual bleached blonde hair, which we will maybe revisit in the future, but not right now. Um, We're not mulleting though. We can't do that. I
No,
am not Kiefer Sutherland. I do not have that face. I can't do this.
he's one of the very few people who can rock a really good mullet, and and he does
Right?
it really well in that movie.
It's just like, why are you hot with this mullet? You shouldn't be this fine. It goes against all laws of God and nature.
That's because he was Kiefer, man.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that movie and it made me love Kiefer Sutherland, and I have loved Kiefer Sutherland through a lot of like really not great things he has done. Like
Yeah.
to it, I love Kiefer Sutherland's voice a lot. So you know that movie Phone Booth, the
Yes.
one he does with Colin Farrell. I'll
Right.
watch that willingly, but I won't watch it. I will put it on and I will do something else just so I can listen to Kiefer Sutherland because his voice when he's being evil, chef's kiss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with what's his name? James Earl Haley. Jackie Earl Haley. Oh my gosh,
Oh yeah.
James. Combined like three
I was like,
people
wait a
there.
minute, that's not quite right. I was
No,
trying to
no,
figure it out.
no. I combined like four different actors and it's Jackie Earl Haley. Love his voice. Love when he is evil. Love it all.
Yeah.
That's why I gave the Nightmare on Elm Street remake a chance. It's
Yeah.
not his fault that I didn't like it, but I did. I
Well,
tried.
that's definitely for an episode another time.
And definitely for sure. But yeah, but I am excited for Evil Dead Rise. I'm assuming you are
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah, no, I've seen the trailers. I have a poster of it already. I am like super hyped for it. This looks to be on par with at least the last Evil Dead movie, which I love. So
The remake.
yeah, the remake.
I I'm not with you on that, but I respect your opinions. I think you had don't you have an episode coming up or like
I
haven't
do. The
had an
next
episode
episode
before?
is yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say. So I'm sure that whomever you're talking to then will cover all that. But I th- I am a purist. I'm an Evil Dead purist. I only love the trilogy and nothing else. And also, that's not true because I love Ash versus Evil Dead. I do, but
I mean,
I don't know.
technically, that's part of the original trilogy. Like,
Yeah, it's a
yeah, it's part of
continuation.
that. Yeah,
Um, but I will say this visually, the the remake is quite stunning. I'm not ever gonna down that.
yeah,
Visually, it's quite stunning. Um, See, I can always find something that I like about a movie that I don't like.
exactly, exactly. All right.
Uh,
No, go ahead.
oh no, I was just about to say, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for coming on. Let people know where they can find you online.
Hi, yes, you can find me on Twitter at Miss Onika J. Miss is spelled MYS in honor of our great non-binary icon, Utada Hikaru. Um, and hopefully you're nice to me over there.
All right. Yeah, I will have that linked in the show notes, so you can find them there. All right.
Well, thank
I
you
appreciate
again.
you coming on again, and we will have you on again in the future.
I will look forward to it.
Thanks again to Onika for joining me on this episode. Next week, LT joins for part 2 of our look at the Evil Dead franchise with Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2013. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving me 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more from the official TeePublic page, and I also have a Ko-fi page if you'd like to donate that way. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.